And now we're letting this messed up, passive-aggressive woman pull us down. Never follow the lead of the most relationally challenged. Another written question from Abby says, I can't stand my mother-in-law. She's super passive-aggressive and oversteps boundaries with us and always makes me feel small. Any tips to mend the relationship? Things are just awkward and we've stopped going to things. Yes. By the way, super universal, super common, these in-law issues. So one way I have found to kind of help with that, I call them one-sided relationships. Anytime you're in a relationship that you feel small in and the other disproportionately is impacting your life, one thing I might try to do is reframe it. Okay, so because again, let's not think of a mother-in-law. Let's think of a kid in the neighborhood who is just as bossy, but passive aggressive, and oversteps boundaries all the time, comes in your house without knocking, all this stuff, super kind of maybe immature emotionally, doesn't follow rules. If you had a kid in your neighborhood, but he desperately needed friends, he went to your church, you felt a love for him and even maybe actually a compassion for him. Let's say you're an adult and he, let's say, is a 14-year-old kid or a 13-year-old kid, friends with your kid. Here's the question. How would you then handle them? If they're obviously not superior to you, but they act superior to you, how do you handle the 13-year-old, kid that acts like that? And that reframe might help you, because the minute I see the situation differently with this person, I don't have to give up my power. One of the cool things for you, Abby, is you don't have to lose yourself. You actually don't even have to feel awkward. If there's anyone awkward in the room, it's her. And even if she's pushing and saying things we don't say, you could just tilt your head sideways and think, you poor little 13-year-old boy, what is your deal, you little prepubescent boy? Why I think this is such a powerful paradigm. And another way to do it is, let's say your mother-in-law was the greatest soul on earth. Man, nobody was better than your mother-in-law. But she was in a car accident, had a head injury, and from that head injury on, and 6 months in a coma, she acted the way she acts now. I'd go treat her as if she has a head injury that caused all of this. Because we treat people with obvious injuries that act this way. We treat them so different, don't we, than the ones that are just seemingly normal. But no matter how seemingly normal she is, she has some injury somewhere. For her to be so annoying that you don't like her, for her to be so boundaryless that you can't deal with her, for her to be so super passive aggressive, you can't tolerate her, is because she's broken somewhere. Why I like to reframe them is if I don't reframe them, then I kind of start to believe her. I believe when she says, I'm not a good cook. I believe when she says, I'm not a good spouse. But we never believe somebody with a head injury, right? You don't believe everything they say. If a person with a head injury told you were stupid, you wouldn't be like, I know, I should do better, and fall apart and cry all afternoon. You just tilt your head sideways. You'd know they have a head injury. And then what would you do? See, when we get the thought right, the feelings get better and the feelings get healthier generally. But if all of a sudden what you feel all the time with your mother-in-law is she's evil, she's a witch, I can't stand her, she's so demeaning, she's so hard, I can't stand her. If that's what you feel, and then what you do because of those feelings is you avoid her, you ignore her, you don't like her, you don't invite her, then what are you becoming? You're becoming somebody that is directly the opposite of who you are. You're the opposite of you. And you don't like that. None of us like that of what we're becoming when we're dealing with somebody as difficult as this person. So I think in the end, most of us don't like what we're becoming with the most difficult people in our lives, because they're showing us our biggest insecurities. I'm going to bet you bucks, if we could get into this, Abby, I would bet that in the end, she pushes on buttons where you're insecure. She pushes on things about your identity that you are already a little insecure about, or you just have a little self-doubt, right? You don't have the confidence you need, which goes back to that first activity we talked about, is you've got to figure out what you are about, right? Because if what you're about is at least being honorable and respectful to the highest level you can with all people, then you really can't have the issue that you can't stand your mother-in-law. It won't work, right? Because that's probably, I guarantee, totally not you. It's not you. And so the minute you let your mother-in-law create who you are, none of us like it. Ugh, look at that. So it's our agency. It's this will inside of each and every one of us. Some call it the divine spark. It's that little bit of divinity in each one of us that makes us want to be better, that makes us want to care more, that makes us want to play a higher game. And now we're letting this crazy, messed up, passive aggressive woman pull us down. See, we're giving that person way too much power. Nobody has the power to make you worse if you don't follow their lead. So the basic principle is never follow the lead of the most relationally challenged. And then what our mind says we ought to do very easily is either fight them or detach from them and avoid them. But my belief is there's certain people you can't avoid. Because if I spend my entire life avoiding my mother-in-law or whatever, then I'm never learning to deal with her. And I'm never showing my kids how to deal with the difficult mother-in-law. So you have to become the change that you want to become. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't have boundaries. You should. But again, if she had a head injury, you would tell her stuff differently. It doesn't mean you wouldn't tell her. But if she said something passive aggressive and was trying to create a stir, you don't have to fight it. You could actually bring it up. You could bring it up directly. And again, just handle her as the adult that you are, just like you would the 13-year-old boy that's trying to, get your kid to go do something stupid, or just you could handle her like the person that's already has a head injury, and show some compassion. And when we have compassion with people that are injured, we always lead them and we always love them. We're going to lead, but we're going to love. So you can go back and say, no, I know you want to have Christmas on that day. That doesn't work for our family. So we're going to do it here. One other thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to empower your husband to get stronger with his mother. Almost every time, you've all probably heard me say this, is anytime I see a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law issue or a father-in-law, in-law issue, the common denominator is always the child of that in-law, that parent. And generally, anytime I see a weird relationship between a spouse and a parent, it's the child that belongs to that parent that needs to be stronger. They need to be strong enough to push back on the parent and strong enough to push back on their spouse. They've got to hold the space. But I think it might be that your husband isn't been strong enough, so you've carried an undue burden. So we probably got to get him picking up his game a little bit. That's what I would recommend.